All right.
So, brothers and sisters in the Dhamma, we're all now gathered here for this very beautiful start of the weekend with Luang Por. Let us all now put our hearts together and then pay homage to the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha. Araham Sama Sambuddho Bhagava Buddha Bhagavanta Avivademi Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sangham Namami. Over to you, Luang Por.
Okay. So as usual, let's do some meditation. We'll meditate for half an hour. I'll give a little bit of instruction, but mostly in silence. So my voice is okay, Beta?
Yes, crisp and clear.
Okay. So set yourself up so that you're comfortable and that you can hold your posture fairly still for half an hour, best you can do. Awaken to the present moment by listening to sound. Whatever sound is there, just let it come to you. Listen. And notice the silence of awareness. Doesn't matter about the sound. Notice the silence of awareness. Feel your hands. Feel the warmth, the tactile feeling of your hands. And notice the silence of awareness. Listen to sound. Feel your hands. And the silence of awareness is the same, doesn't change. Be that awareness. So notice how you can very easily touch silence, which is not an achievement, it's just remembering something. So from that silent awareness, feel your breath. Feel an in-breath and feel an out-breath. And be that silent awareness. So rather than concentrating on the breath as an object, notice that the breathing or any experience points to the silence of awareness. So you're not trying to control your thoughts by concentrating on the breath. It's more you're trying to remember the silent knowing and then learning to sustain it breath by breath. So there isn't a sense of becoming or getting rid of. It's just knowing how things are. So when you find yourself caught up with thinking, it's natural. You notice that's happening. Just come back to listening. and establish the silence of knowing. And then pick up the breath. So each time you establish the silence of knowing, and then patiently pick up the breath, one breath at a time. Simple enough, but the habits of mind are strong, so be very patient and just experiment. Let's see what happens in this half hour. Beats, I've got a message. It's inviting you to join room 1 or something. What do I do? I'll just take it out, I guess.
Greetings, Uncle.
Okay, there we go. All right.
So, brothers and sisters, let us all now put our hands together to request the Dhamma talk. Brahma Chaloka Vibhati Sahampati Atam Janiya Divara Jata Santi Sata Pamaja Padatika Ese Dhamma Anukam Imam Paja.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasa. Hello everyone, hope you're all well. Here at the monastery, it's very, very beautiful right now. It's the beginning of autumn. The leaves are starting to change. It's really one of my favorite season. And the building is going very, very well. Of the Dharma hall, we've started to the carpenters installing the wood post and beam. So it's very, very beautiful. So I was in there about 4 times today looking at it. I love going in there. So we're doing well. Otherwise, nothing special. Monastic life is special, but not special. We do the same thing all the time. But somehow each day is different. And the environment here is just, we're so privileged, so exquisite. When I offered this meditation, I was trying to indicate the stillness of awareness, that's not so much an experience as a possibility always available. So the sound that I hear like now I can hear the sound of crickets, maybe I'll hear the sound of someone coughing. That sound comes and goes depending on causes and conditions. My emotions, the feelings in my body. So when the autumn comes, I always get memories of the first days of university. Not that I went to university that much, but that's a strong sanya, strong memory. And that arises and ceases. So there is that which arises and ceases, the sense experience that we all have. And that's the kind of foreground of our lives. That's where we live our lives. We live in our different environments with our families and friends. And we try to do the best we can within the situations we are living. And that part of the teaching is, as we know, it says, do good, refrain from doing harm, or do as much good as you can and do as little harm as possible. that's a huge task already. It's just to be a good person. And that's very, very important, obviously, because that's the foundation for a sense of wellness, a sense of clarity, a sense of maturity in one's culture. But that activity in itself can never liberate, because it's always very fraught with circumstances. So liberation, I like to think of it sometimes as the background. So foreground and background really work well for me as analogies. Foreground is the sense experience, feelings, emotions, memories, moods, the whole 9 yards of our experience. But that's not all there is. It's not just sense experience. There's something else going on. And you sense that when you just stop and observe. You stop and observe the sound. And you don't identify with the sound. It's not so much the sound, it's the knowing or the awareness. And I consider that the background. So now with the crickets are cricketing. What some crickets do? Do they cricket? I'm not sure what crickets do, but anyway, they're doing their thing outside, and I like the sound. So my mind goes up to sound, and I listen, and then I might say, oh, a lot of crickets this year, and so on. So I'm engaged with sound. This is the normal way one does things. But also I can just sit back and be the witness of sound. I can do that also. So I'm not identifying or engaging with the sound. I'm simply allowing sound to be sound. So now it's not sound that's important, it's the witnessing. I'm emphasizing the witnessing. And I like to think that as the background. Now the background is very, very peaceful. The foreground is changing. So sometimes it's pleasant, sometimes it's unpleasant. If we only have the foreground, if we only have sights and sounds and emotions and memories and relationships and all of that, we'll always be just on a treadmill, reacting, trying to make it the best you can, which is okay. But then we'll be missing something, I think. We'll be missing a deep possibility in human consciousness of peacefulness. So it's not so far away, but what we tend to do is we tend to always be identified or caught up with usually our memories, usually thoughts, emotions. So let's say I'm at the airport. I'm waiting for someone to come into the airport, and I start to feel a bit of anxiety that maybe the person hasn't made it or whatever. The anxiety is the foreground, and that's natural. I want this person to arrive. I want them to have a safe journey. I'm there to meet them. Now, that anxiety is something that arises because of causes and conditions. Now, if I'm not attentive to that, then I become anxious. And then I'm relieved when the person comes. But I don't have to do that. I don't have to always identify with the anxiety. I can witness to it. And so if I have a language of witnessing where I emphasize the background as opposed to the foreground, then that becomes a training in peace. Not the peace of never feeling anxiety or always feeling happy or healthy. And that's not possible. I can't always feel comfortable. Sometimes I'll feel discomfort. So that's not possible. But it is possible to begin to emphasize the background. And what I was saying last time about Luang Por Sumedho's practice, and by the way, I must apologize, last time I was using all kinds of unorthodox ways of talking about Buddhism and just playing around with some of the words. And I do that sometimes because people, quite often, they will take Buddhism as a dogma and not reflect on it, because the real secret of Buddhist practice is reflection rather than some dogmatic position. So for instance, you'll hear Theravada Buddhists say, the Buddha said there's no self. First of all, they weren't there. So how do they know? Right? So all of a sudden there's this kind of conceit that I was there and I know what the Buddha said. No, you just heard it from someone else. And actually you heard it wrong. Because where do you find anywhere that the Buddha said there's no self? Now that's dogma, and it's incorrect dogma. So in the Anatalakkhana Sutta, what it said, this is not mine. This is not who I am. This is not self. And he's pointing to the body, emotions, memories, feelings, relationships. That's what he's pointing to. Anything that's changing, you don't have control over. You don't identify with it. Now, that's not saying there's no self. And that's a trick question I ask cultural Buddhists. I say, okay, the Buddha said, true or false? Hands up. Buddha said, there's no self. And then people, oh, this is a trick. Should I put my hand up or not? And sometimes I try. Well, that's dogma. You know, you just pick up something, which actually makes no sense. There's no, what does that actually mean? If I fall over and break my leg, I feel it. You don't feel it. You can say to me, "Oh, there's no self." But yeah, well, there's still a feeling. There's still something going on. So this is when any tradition becomes, I would say, dead, because people just kind of believe something. They have to reflect on it. But when you reflect on something like identity, this is a big word now in North American culture. I identify as, right? Well, let's say I'm in the airport and I'm feeling anxious for someone to come off the plane. Now, what do I mean by, what does the Buddha mean to say, this is not mine, I'm not this is not myself? That's what we mean by identity. And what's happening? Well, the anxiety comes up because I have a desire that things work out nicely. And that desire can be frustrated because I don't have control. So I have this desire, and then I manifest thinking around that desire because it might not happen. And I feel anxious. And then my mind starts to think, and I'm caught or I'm reborn or I'm identified with feeling of anxiety. And then if I'm a kind of hardcore meditator, then I try to get rid of the anxiety. Now, just watch your breath, Viradhammo. Just watch your breath now. Just watch your, but that's not really being aware either. It's just trying to get rid of anxiety. But if I see anxiety, and just as an example, if I see that's the foreground, what's the background? Well, the background is silent awareness. Now, you can touch silent awareness if you make the intention to do that. And going back to Luang Por Sumedho's references, when I was chatting with him about the Anatalakkhana Sutta and the way we misuse that sometimes in Theravada Buddhism, he said he used the word I for quite a long time as a practice. Now, that's not a dogmatic position. You just would use the word I. Now, what happens when you do that? So I did that at the airport. So I could feel this sort of anxiety that, you know, this person is okay. And then I just say I. And then there's the silent witnessing. Now, I'm not saying I am anything, right? I'm not making any identity out of it. I'm using a word, and I is actually a very, very powerful word. But I'm not saying I'm Viradhammo or I'm anxious or I'm anything. I'm actually using that word to heighten the background or awareness. It's very, very powerful. Now, what we quite often do is we argue with the mind. Should be, you know, I should be anxious. It'll be okay. It'll be okay. Well, it might not be okay. It might not be okay. So I get into a kind of inner argument, which is actually still in the foreground. It's not really the background. And we get trapped into these cycles of thought, worry, anxiety, resentment. So I might feel resentment about someone did something to me last week, and then the memory comes up, and then I think, oh, I'm not going to forgive that person. Oh, I should forgive them. No, I'm not going to forgive them. I should forgive them. It's all foreground. You never resolve it that way. But if you start to see what we mean by taking refuge in Buddha, that's the background of stillness of knowing. Now, to do that, all you have to do is really remind yourself. Remind yourself. So I'm in the airport, and then this anxiety comes up. I said, I. And why am I doing that? I'm not trying to find myself as some existential experience. I'm just using a word to reference the stillness of knowing. And then it's still. And then the anxiety comes up again, I. And then it's still again. So what the I word does, or what Luang Por uses, it's like this. It's the moment after I say the word. The moment after the word is silent attention. So it's not analysis. It's not some kind of statement. There is no self. It's not that at all. It's realizing that the attachment to this feeling, I don't have to do that. I don't have to get caught by it. I just, I. And so the anatta lakkhana is, I am not this is not mine, this is not self. It arises for the causes and conditions. If it was mine, I would just say, well, I don't think I'll do anxiety for the next week. Who can do that? Who can, like all of us here, can say to you, okay, this week, you won't get annoyed, all right? You will get annoyed, unless you're some saint, you get annoyed. You just stub your toe or you'll do something silly and you'll feel embarrassed or whatever. And that's natural. It's a part of nature. It's dharma. Not me, not mine. So that's not saying there's no self. It's just don't identify with that. Do your best. You know, do your best to help people. That's important. Be moral. Be generous. Do that. But don't take refuge in the foreground. Take refuge in the background. That makes sense. It's a bit, it's not that difficult. But that's the real, I would say, the nub of what we mean by renunciation. So you need both. We need to live in the world in a decent and proper way. We need to help each other because that's what it means to be a human being. It's to serve and to help. And that brings a certain amount of joy. And friendships and kalyanamitta, those are very, very important. And that's a foundation then, a foundation for the transcendent realization, because the Buddha's teaching wasn't just a social philosophy. It's very good. There's good social philosophy in it, but it's much, much, much more than that. So in your own, I would suggest in your own life, what are the patterns of identity, of thinking? Where does your mind go? Where does it sort of lose the present moment? Identify that. Don't criticize it. Don't judge it. Don't try to get rid of it. And then use that as your vehicle for going to the background. So I was talking to someone, was it this morning? When was it? When was Tilaka here? Was that this morning? Yesterday? This morning. Sorry. So I was talking to someone this morning, and they have a lot of anxiety about a certain issue. So I was saying to this person, well, anxiety is natural because you have a lot of pressure. It's not your fault, but it's not really who you are, but you are experiencing it. So why don't you learn how to identify the anxiety as an object? And that's always the secret of non-attachment. When we talk about non-attachment, Buddhism, people think non-attachment means you don't feel anything. That's impossible. We are sensitive beings. Our bodies are sensitive, our emotions are sensitive. So to say to someone, if they're feeling something, you're attached, is not true. It's not kind. Attachment is through thought. So again, the example, I feel that and this lady, I said, okay, you'll feel anxiety because of those pressures you have, but can you just say, oh, anxiety is like this? So I was using the word I ever since I came back from Newfoundland with Luang Por. Very powerful word, I, but not I anything, just I. And that brings up a sense of presence. Now, another way you could talk about the background is the sense of presence. And it's very hard to talk about the background. It's very hard because it has no color. Like presence has no color. It has no shape. It has no gender. It's not big or small. Can you say awareness is big? Can you say it's small? Can you say it's female? Can you say it's male? Can you say it's Canadian? Can you say it's Thai, old, young? None of those. No qualifications apply to awareness. Now, some teachers use like just the sense of presence. presence. Now, wherever you are right now, there is a sense of presence, correct? And as that sense of presence, does it have a quality? It doesn't have a quality. So sometimes in religious literature, we say identify as awareness. That's also hard because our identities always sort of involve seemingly like an ego. So Luang Por would say, be awareness itself. And that's kind of hard to get your head around because you want to be happy, you want to be clever or skillful, you want to be a thing. And that's where desire comes up, being a thing. Well, you can, we certainly try. I try to be more skillful if I'm doing woodwork, or try to be more skillful in communication or writing an email. Those are fine. Those are very, very fine. We do our best. They're not transcendent. So doing our very, very best in that realm, then we tried to contemplate, well, what was the Buddha pointing to? Was he pointing to efficiency or just worldly skills? No, he was pointing to more than that. And if you start to take the background as your reference rather than the foreground, you have to do this a lot to get kind of used to it, because the foreground just grabs you, your emotions and your memories and your compulsions and all the rest of that, or your pain in your body, or the sickness your body's feeling, or the beautiful memories or the sad memories. They're very compelling kind of things. But if you start to train in being awareness itself, let us say, as a way of speaking, not as an absolute kind of dogma, then you'll notice it's very difficult to leave things alone. It's very difficult to feel uninspired and not try to get inspired. So I find that with craft work. So I was doing something, and then the project kind of, something happened and the wind went out of my sails, and just the feeling I'll never do woodwork again, which is ridiculous. I will, but the feeling of deflation is a very, very real feeling. Now, that's not the same as the feeling of inflation, not financially, or inspiration. It's a different feeling, right? And we like inspiration, we don't like desperation. But they're part of the same coin. So if I'm taking the background, if you follow me on this kind of train of thinking, if I take the background as my reference point, then when the emotion of disinterest or boredom or whatever comes up, I know that as a changing condition. And what we fail to do very oftentimes is we fail to allow things to run their course and cease into the silence of the mind, because they're not happy states of mind. Inspiration is a happy state of mind. Being bored or thinking this isn't working is not a happy state of mind. And if I always jump from one to inspiration, then the inspiration will condition this lack of inspiration and always be on a cycle. And that's one of the ways we talk about rebirth. Or I might feel resentment. And then rather than feeling and knowing resentment from the position of witness, I try to fix it. And this is what we do. I analyze it, or I think about it, and I get into the thinking mode, identifying with it with thought. And it never ceases then. But if I can just witness resentment is this way, and I'm very, very patient, it's not a pleasant state of mind. Everyone says I should forgive. I should be a nice person. I'm a monk. I should love everyone. Good luck. The reality is we don't. We don't love everyone all the time. That's the reality of our emotional life. So then when I feel a lack of whatever it is, and I just witness it, if I have faith to witness it, then that habit of negativity has a chance to go to Nirodha, has a chance to cease. And why is that difficult? Because of desire. My desire mind does not want this negative emotion. It wants its opposite. It wants the positive. And that is, in one way, it's very, very good. It's very good to want to be compassionate and kind and generous and so on. But it can then become another kind of dogmatic position. I should love everyone all the time. And then there's the judgment of that. But if I witness something, I can certainly move my mind to, another state of mind. But just to witness something like feeling disgruntled and not going to the thinking, that's the problem. Going to the thought, identifying with it with thought, and just running with the thinking process. And that thinking process can be self-judgment, other judgment, and it's identifying with it. Here, we're not saying anything. Well, just say, resentment feels this way, I. And you pop an I in there, you see how very, very powerful it is. That whole pattern of judgment, thinking, and the endless cycle of that, you keep, it's like you just interrupt it. You interrupt the reality and the seeming reality of it by just saying I. And then there's the silence afterwards. It comes up again. You say I. And you start to emphasize the background. Then you'll find these things are not a threat. And as they cease, what's ceasing is the kind of negativity of the ego, the kind of limited self that we identify with. And as that ceases, the Brahma Viharas automatically manifest. The Brahma Viharas are the emotional constitution of enlightenment. That's what they are. That's what happens to the human heart when it's not caught up with its limited identities to emotions and the body. So on a practical level, this body, this Viradhammo body, is something that I witness to. There is witnessing of the body. I could say it's a natural body. There's still a responsibility to take care of it, or it's going to get worse, but it's not getting much better. And at 76, it shouldn't get much better. And I work out and I do my little exercises, but lo and behold, my mind thinks that I'm 30 years old. But when I try to jump from rock to another, my body doesn't jump because it's a 76-year-old body. It's not me, it's not mine. It's a force in nature. And that is so liberating to know that your real identity is not the body. And yet, the practice is within the body, right? And this is where the learning takes place in this body. My learning doesn't take place in your body, it takes place in this body. But the learning is not about having a perfected body or a body living eternally. That's not possible. But it's rather that within the changing nature of the body, there's that which is unchanging, which is the witness or awareness or stillness of knowing. And so then bodily pain, like I'm really noticing this year, the thing is really aging. It's really doing a number on me. This is not good. So, but it's all right. This is what it's supposed to do. What is it? A 75-year-old body's supposed to be doing that. It's not supposed to get younger. So you can see the logic, but then it's interesting watching my perceptions now. I watch these guys on the building site, and my knees are giving me some problems. So I watch these guys on the building site, and I watch them jump. I said, ooh, they can jump. It's like this kind of emotional yearning. Oh, I wish I could jump. And why is that? I don't program my mind to think that. It's because my knees hurt. It's because my knees hurt. I see someone who doesn't have painful knees. That's just the way the mind works. It's not really who I am, right? And I can notice that and have a sense of humor around that. As things get worse, I might lose my sense of humor. I hope I keep it. But obviously, when aging takes place, what is the refuge? The body, the emotions, the feelings of like and dislike. They're just natural phenomena. So the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta is saying that in the flow of natural phenomena, there is pleasure and pain. There are perceptions around that. There are thoughts around that. This is not mine. This is not who I am. This is not self. Now, that's not saying there's no self. That's a different kind of categorical statement. Say, don't identify with that. And so that's what you have to understand, what we mean by attachment, identification. There's different words around that. And that language is not saying that you will be someone who will never feel pain Ajahn Chah feel pain. You know, he was paralyzed for 10 years. So that's there. That's just a part of the package. And the emotions can feel lonely, you feel upset. That's okay. That's just the way it is. But the more you identify with witnessing or awareness, it's no longer so loud. It's not a problem. And again, if you allow these things to cease, if you allow doubt to just be doubt, not know. People don't know how to be with doubt because they just think all the time. But just the feeling, I don't know, is a feeling. I feel confident is a feeling. It comes and it goes. So in Buddhism, we always have these two levels of consideration. One is the worldly level, being competent in the world, being able to put food on the table and take care of my family and all the other things that we need to do as human beings. That's one level. And that's to be done well, to be done as craft, to be done really skillfully. And then the other level is that which is truly peaceful, which is not dependent on these things. Another one, like the Buddhists will, Theravada Buddhists will sometimes say, it's all suffering. Now, what the heck does that mean? You know, they're just like, it's all suffering. This is kind of negative. But that's just a kind of programmed statement that gets put out there, as it were. That's dogma. It's also, what is that pointing to? What that's pointing to is the word dukkha. And the word dukkha really can mean suffering. It can mean unsatisfactoriness. And why do we use the word unsatisfactory? Because there is something which can satisfy you, and that is silence. That is silent awareness. That is where you find fulfillment. So when we say that which has the nature to arise has the characteristic of change, also has the characteristic of unsatisfactoriness. It means don't rely on it. Don't rely on inspiration. When you get it, great. If you get good health, good on you. If you win the lotto, probably blow your mind away. Whatever it is, it comes and it goes. But what doesn't come and go? Right? What isn't the function of change? Is there anything like that? So sometimes Buddhists will say, everything's changing. Did the Buddhists say that? I don't know, I wasn't there. But is that true? And how can you know if that's true? You have to check it out. Everything changes. Well, is that true? Or what about the unconditioned, the unchanging, nibbana? What was that about? So this is the language we use for reflection rather than belief. And dogma and just kind of believing in Buddhist things won't free your mind. So if you start to say, okay, there's that which changing, what's unchanging? Is there anything unchanging? You have to be very, very quiet. If you start thinking that's changing, you have to be very, very quiet. Is there anything unchanging? And that's a question that is the same as the question or the statement, I. Because when you ask yourself, is there anything unchanging? That silence takes you to the background. It's the same thing. It's like this. It's the same kind of suggestion to abide as the background. And then the challenge is, how long can I do that? Can I be that background? Do I trust in that? And what happens, of course, my mind doubts or gets upset, and I get reborn into all these different patterns. So it's not an easy thing by any means. I think it's quite simple to understand, but our habits are very complex. But if you just start, like you start to wake up in the morning and see, what is your mind creating? What sense of an I is it creating with the anxiety or whatever, and say, I. And come back to pure witnessing. Just like that. And keep breaking up the patterns of self-thinking and identity. And then you'll find this natural background of peace is always there. You can always refer to it. Not by rejecting the emotional life, but just by no longer investing so much in, no longer identifying. You have to put a lot of time into this. A lot of, not necessarily cushion time, But intention time, you have to intend to do this a lot. And you can still function. You still drive a car and all that, but you begin to sense the background. And there's the crickets. All right, so I'll leave that for your reflection. Can you hear the crickets? No. Okay, I can hear.
Damayang Dhamma Kataya Sadhu Karang Dhamma Se Sadhu 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 Anumodami. Thank you so much, Luang Por.
Okay, Vita. Any questions for anyone?
We'd like to now open the floor for questions and answers. Please click on the raise hand button and we'll invite you to unmute. We have a question from Miri. Miri, can you please unmute yourself? Can you unmute yourself yet? Yes. Can you press unmute, Miri? Great.
There you go. Hi, Miri.
Hello, Luang Por. I'm sorry about the soundtrack that's just started. The soundtrack of Tanha in the background. There's a cat that's adopted us, and he's just turned up, and he's might be making a bit of noise.
Welcome him in. We'll be meeting in Tiruvannamalai, I think, right?
Yes, I've been there for a month already.
Oh, you're there now?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Oh, good for you.
Yes.
How long are you going to be there?
Another month.
Are you there in January?
Yes, I plan to come back in, so go back to Perth in a month and then come back here in November and then stay till February. So
Great, I'll see you there.
are you going? Are you going to?
Yes, yes, I'm going with Amrit Siri.
Wonderful.
So I'll see you at the ashram. But do you have a question?
Yes.
Or do you want to say something?
Oh, yes. It's so I've been the tradition associated with here is like the Advaita Vedanta tradition, but there's a David discovered a teacher here who we've been going every day. Like there's nothing that would suggest that she isn't like a fully realized being. It's an amazing experience, and what she's saying is just so resonant with how your talks have been going with the background, like stillness and the sense of being, and the I, and it's just remarkable the congruence and
lovely.
And anyway, so by yesterday when I was in the session, I had this thought or popped up, which was very resonant with what you were talking about today, and it's to do with the present moment. And I loved what you were saying today about the foreground and the background, and find that very, very helpful. But yeah, not that, and with the present moment, often how we think about it, and how to say in Western philosophy how they think about the present is something they objectify it, they extrovert it. And when you think about the present in connection with objects, it's very impermanent. It's always coming and going, it's knife edge. But then when you think about the present, you move it back from the object to the subject. It's like it never comes and it never goes. It goes to the almost like the eternal side without turning it into eternalism, without turning it into a self. But there's just that never not coming and not going. So, and I found that very interesting to play around with. So when present becomes extroverted into the object, it's like the impermanence coming and going, and that's where we often live our lives. But when it goes sort of pans back into the subject, it's the now becomes eternal, and
Yes, yeah.
the background. Yeah, so it just connected very well with what you were talking about today. So that's sort of more a comment, but also the question does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. That's why in the 5 khandhas, when you use vijnana, it's vijnana about objects, and then the vijnana, that's the kind of like the unconditioned, isn't referenced much. So people think that consciousness is only referenced as something changing. So when someone like Luang Por uses consciousness in the like as the unconditioned, people go, it can't be. It's the 5th khandha, and that's when it gets dogma again. You know, when you get dogma, you don't reflect. And no, Buddha said this, it can't be that. But then you have to take the teaching. There is the unconditioned, the uncreated. What is that? What did he realize? And so this is where it gets, the language gets difficult in Theravada because it's so via negativa, right? And so it's basically the abandoning of desire. But you can see when you witness desire and you don't go for it, then there's still the witnessing. And that's what I think I try to emphasize, because I am very much influenced by Advaita and those teachers. They've been very, very helpful for me. And then Luang Por Chah's or Luang Por Sumedho's be the knowing. They like in Thai, they say puru. And Luang Por, pur means person, and ru means knowing. Be the one who knows is how it's translated. And Ajahn Sumedho says, no, just know. Like there's no person knowing, there is knowing. And it's very ineffable. And that's where thought just does not work anymore. That's why silence is really the secret. But it's not the silence of suppression where you're holding an object, preventing the mind from thinking. It's not that, because that's based on control. So it's the silence of, it's like this, I, and then trusting in that and training in that. So I look forward to seeing you and David there.
I really, really look forward to it. I haven't met you yet in person, just over online. You're definitely my favorite Buddhist Dhamma teacher, so it'd be very nice to meet you in person. So.
Well, I knew your parents so well, so I probably know you in some way. So
yes,
that should be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I really look forward.
Okay. See you then.
See you.
Okay. Anyone else? There's a hand. Karen.
Karen, yes, now we can see you. Karen, can you click on unmute?
Unmute.
Well, can you hear me?
I can. How are you doing?
Okay. Fine, thank you, Luang Por. Thank you for that wonderful talk. And following on your conversation with Miri, I wanted to also bring up the foreground background analogy. And there was something else that you said earlier on, which really struck a note with me, and it was about that inspiration and deflation are 2 sides of the same coin. For the longest time, I've reflected upon whether nirvana and samsara are 2 sides of the same coin, because when I practice your teaching of silence of knowing, it stops all these two very, very vast concepts that, keeps us in a limbo of sorts. So I'm just wondering whether it is something in which that silences all things that is the ultimate objective of our practice. That's my question.
Well, silence is the gateway. Put it that way. And you can consider silence in the Theravada sense, maybe samma samadhi. So it's samma samadhi because it's not a controlled samadhi. It's a kind of trusting openness. And that's why like metta is very important, that the samadhi isn't like a control thing, It's an openness to the flow of the khandhas or whatever it is. So it's not a controlling. And in that openness, like I was saying the other day, that one teacher was saying that you could look at silence in three ways. You can look at silence as circumstance. So the monastery is a very silent place, a very quiet place, that kind of silence. So you can be in your own room silent. The silence between thoughts, that's a different kind of silence. You can be in your room and thinking a lot, but when you notice the silence between thoughts, and silence and space are used, artists, musicians talk a lot about, it's not just about the notes, it's about the space between the notes. It's not just about the forms, but it's space around the forms. For a meditator, it's not just about thought, it's the space between thoughts. So that's another kind of silence. And when that silence is noticed and explored, then that leads to the deeper silence of liberation. So that's the point you have to trust. And that's the point where the doubting or thinking mind is kind of says to you, is that right? Am I going in the right direction? Now you're thinking. Is this the silence he was talking about? No, you're thinking. So it's just I. Very powerful. That's a very powerful I. It's not I anything. I. And then you hold it. You are the silence. It's very hard to describe, but more and more you trust. And this is for me what I mean. For me, saddha or faith in Buddhism would be that trust in awareness, a trust in silence, rather than trust in the analytical mind. And most of us have trusted the analytical mind for very good reasons, because it's a useful tool. But in this case, it's a distraction. So thought then is used to bring you to silence, rather than thought being used to some kind of thought conclusion. This isn't a conclusion. Silence is not a conclusion. Intellectually, it is the way it is. And then abiding as that, knowing that, being that, and that opens to a deeper silence. And then those, the language of is samsara, the flip of this and that, that's really where thought's not going to be helpful. It's, and the real problem then is the tanha, this kind of craving for experience and existence. And that's what we need to witness and allow it to cease. And that's what I was saying earlier. That's the difficult part. We don't let things cease. We don't let, we know the craving, and then we try to fix it or do something about it. So to abide with unfulfilled craving is almost counterintuitive. Yeah, so you need craving, you need food and comfort and shelter and safety, sure. But then that kind of emotional craving for security, whatever, you just witness this sense of, like just talking to that lady this morning about anxiety, and I always talk about that. Like the feeling of anxiety, my desire patterns don't want this anxiety. But if I just know it and let it cease, then there's this kind of wonderful recognition that that's not a problem. That's just nature. And that recognition deepens the faith and trust in awareness. But the other of trying to sort it out, not have anxiety, just keeps you spinning around all the time. So the fact that the kind of sense of silence is interesting for you, develop a language which heightens that. Not the language of analysis, but it heightens just, and that can just be a phrase. It's like this. And then I should get really, really good at that. It's very simple that way.
So Luang Por, what you're saying is you have to trust in awareness and deepen the experience of awareness in itself without thought. Is that correct?
That, yeah. And doing it without trying to get rid of thought. Any kind of suggestion is really difficult because it can quickly jump into desire. Okay, the guy says I should be silent, so my thoughts come up, shut up. And you're already in desire. Whereas awareness knows thought as arising and ceasing. That'll always be a challenge, always a challenge.
One of the things I actually, again, the questioning mind is, am I over-identifying with this bearing witness aspect? Is it another form of identification?
Well, just say I. and see what happens. Because, you know, if you take that, you know, it's just like you just get one answer and then you'll get another answer. It's ad nauseum that just goes around in circles. So you go right to it. I. It's just a sankhara, arising and ceasing. Not me, not mine. It's that directness and trust. That's when we say ujupatipano. The Sangha's ujupatipano. It's like really kind of going to the mark every time. Okay?
Luang Por, I try.
Okay, Karen.
Any more questions from the floor? Anyone at all? Last question.
Okay.
Okay, Luang Por, it seems that everyone's very happy today. No further questions, Luang Por.
I like happy customers. Shall we chant the Metta Sutta?
Yes, shall we please invite?
Can you get it up on the screen? We can lead it from here.
Yes, I will do it. I will do it now.
Okay.
Okay, it's up on the screen. If anyone can you see it yet?
Can't see it. There it goes. Almost. There
Okay.
it is. Please join. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties, and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm, and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later be proved, wishing in gladness and in safety. May all beings be at ease, whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great and the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born. May all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another, even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, free from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness. One should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding, by not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being free from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Okay, everyone. Lovely to be with you.
Thank you, Luang Por. Please allow us all now to pay respects and pay homage to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha as we take leave from you, Luang Por.
Okay.
Araham Sama Sambuddho Bhagava Buddham Bhagavantang Avivademi
The whippoorwill.
Swatata Bhagavata Dhammo Dhamma Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sawakasango Sangham Namami. Thank you so much, Luang Por. May you
Okay,
have
Vita.
may you have a great weekend, a great month ahead. Take care.
I'll do my best. Okay, ciao.